This will be day 9, I guess now, February 18th. And yesterday, you went over 3 of the 4 macromolecules. So again, we're talking about the molecules that are required to build life, to build a cell. So we went through carbohydrates, hopefully yesterday, protein, and what was the last one? Lipids. Okay, so those are 3 of the molecules that are required to build a cell. We need one more molecule, which we're going to talk about today, which is nucleic acids. Okay, and these ones happen to be my most favorite macromolecule because nucleic acids are the ones that make up DNA. Okay? And DNA is such an important aspect of biology. So if you want to take a look here, I'm just going to slide this over. So this is what I had my kids in class do today, was they built a DNA molecule. Okay? So here's a picture of a DNA molecule, and we can see the double helix in here. And again, this is what DNA looks like. It's basically programming your entire body on how to build your body and how to run your body. So what we're going to be talking about today is the stuff inside here. Okay? These little tiny bases inside, which we call nucleic acids. So here's kind of the overall structure of DNA. We're going to be actually talking about just a part of it today. Okay, so I'll slide that over. Oops. All right. So got a little slideshow here that we're going to go through what I think is important about DNA. Okay, so to start with, DNA is composed of nucleic acids. So here's a structure of DNA, okay, and we're also going to talk about RNA as well, and there's a structure of RNA. Okay, and we're going to be talking specifically about nucleic acids, which are basically the building blocks of DNA. Okay, so recap. We've already talked about 3 of the 4 macromolecules: carbs, protein, and lipids. That was our last lesson. Okay, we have one last one to cover, nucleic acids. Then we know exactly what's required to build a cell. So just a little bit of an introduction. I know there's a lot of information here, but we got to go through it. When we looked at the previous macromolecules, and when we looked at carbs, proteins, and fats, there's multiple purposes to each of those. Okay, where you have fats that are there for storage as well as for cushioning. You have carbohydrates that are there for structure as well as storage as well as instant energy. Protein had just a tremendous number of different functions. Okay, when we get to our last one, nucleic acids, there's not a lot of functions they have. They really only do one thing. They provide basically the instruction manual on how to build a cell. You're not going to get any nutrition from these. Okay, we can't get any energy from eating DNA. Okay, we only use our DNA to make our own DNA from. Okay, so we eat other animals and plants' DNA, we break it apart, and then we construct our DNA from those building blocks. Okay, so nucleic acids, the other thing about them is they're much larger than proteins, than fats, than lipids. Okay, sorry, not proteins, fats, lipids, and carbohydrates. They're much larger. They're a very big molecule. Okay. So to start with, we're just going to go over some differences between DNA and RNA. Okay, so DNA makes RNA. RNA is made from DNA. Okay, or as far as you guys are concerned right now in the course. So DNA, full name is deoxyribonucleic acid. Okay? And RNA is ribose nucleic acid. Now here's one of the big differences between the two. There's 3 big differences, and here's one of them. RNA uses a ribose sugar. So here's a carbohydrate. So we have a carbohydrate that is part of another macromolecule, nucleic acids. So in this RNA, the carbohydrate that's part of the nucleic acid is a ribose sugar. Okay? When we go over to DNA, if you notice, see how this one has an OH group or a hydroxy group, if we're talking about functional groups? Over here, I don't have that oxygen, so I call it deoxyribose. So the only difference between the two is this one's missing an oxygen, so we call it deoxyribose sugar, and this one's ribose sugar. So that's one of the differences between DNA and RNA. The other difference, or one of the other differences, is the bases that compose DNA and RNA. So when I talk about bases, I'm talking about what's inside here. Okay, so the letters that are inside the DNA, okay, right here. Now, when we have DNA, we have 4 possible combinations: T, A, C, and G. And just to give you a heads up, T has to bond with A. Okay, there's no other option of T bonding with G. It has to bond with A, and G has to bond with C. And if you notice, in DNA, whenever you have a T on the other side, you're going to have an A, and wherever you have a C, you're going to have a G on the other side. Okay. When we go talk about RNA, the same rules apply. G must bond with C. However, we don't have a letter T or thymine. It's been converted to another type of nucleotide called uracil. Okay, so there's a second difference. So we have different sugars between RNA and DNA. We've got one different base between the two, but again, it's only the one base that's the difference. And the last one you can see from this picture right here, one is double-stranded DNA, and the other one is single-stranded RNA. And those are the three differences that I want you to know, the difference between DNA and RNA. It's going to help us out in our genetics unit. Now, we look at our DNA. Okay, so here's our basic structure. Now, it's not actually that complicated. Basically, we have the sugar-phosphate backbone. So if you notice, we got a phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar. Down one side, and on the other side, same thing, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar. This is kind of like the scaffolding, okay, where this is really just kind of there holding the letters in place. This is the important stuff right here, okay? Everybody in the entire world has a sugar-phosphate backbone. Every bacteria, every fungi, all living things have a sugar-phosphate backbone along the outside, okay? So that's not different between us and, say, a tree. We're both going to have the sugar-phosphate backbone. But the orders of letters inside that sugar-phosphate backbone differs between humans, between trees, between pumpkins, between individuals within a species. Like different human beings are going to have different orders of these letters, okay? Unless you're an identical twin, which you'd have the same order. All right, now if I go back to the last thing I wanted to mention, because this is DNA, here's my little sugar molecule right here, and it would all be deoxyribose sugar. Okay. Now, this is the important part, the stuff in between. Okay, so we call these bases, okay, nitrogen-containing bases, and there's four options. There's A, T, G, and C. And like I mentioned before, A is always going to be bonding with T, and G is always going to bond with C. Okay, notice the three bonds here between G and C, and only the two bonds here between T and A. And that's always the case. Between A and T, there's always a double bond. Between G and C, there's always a triple bond. So there's a better picture of it. So here's my sugar-phosphate backbone on both sides, and then I have my more important nitrogenous bases in the middle. Okay, so DNA can really be thought of as a polymer of repeating phosphate sugar-base complex, nucleotides. So here's our basic structure down here. Okay, so I'm going to have a phosphate, which is right here. I'm going to have my sugar, and if it's DNA, it's going to be deoxyribose, and that's going to be the same all the way through. What's going to be different is this part right here, the nitrogenous base, because I have one of four options. I could be A, T, G, or C. Now, this part right here, this whole thing is called a nucleotide. Okay? And all DNA is this nucleotide repeated over and over again. I've got, here's one nucleotide, the phosphate, the sugar, and the base. And then right behind it, I have the phosphate, sugar, and the base. Phosphate, sugar, and the base. It's just repeating. Just like how cellulose is glucose over and over and over again, or starch is just glucose over and over and over again, or how proteins are amino acid attached to another amino acid attached to another amino acid. Okay? DNA is the same kind of thing. It's one molecule that keeps getting repeated over and over and over again. Okay? And that molecule is called the nucleotide. So here's our bigger picture of a nucleotide, my phosphate group, my sugar, and then my nitrogenous base. There's just a bigger picture of DNA. I want to make sure that we understand that it's a double helix structure, so it actually wraps around. When I show it to you like this, it's for simplistic sake, but it's not flat like this. Okay, it's actually wrapped around in a double helical structure here. And we're going to talk a lot about that structure when we get into genetics in this course. So that's DNA. Now we're going to cover RNA. We'll go a little bit quicker because we've got all the basics down. So here's RNA. It's going to have the same basic idea. We're going to have a phosphate, a sugar, and then a base. Okay, but it's only going to be single-stranded, one of the big differences. Right? The other difference is this sugar is not going to be deoxyribose. It's going to be ribose sugar. And then the last difference compared to DNA to RNA is I'm not going to have any thymines there. Wherever I have a thymine, I'll have a uracil. So this uracil would attach to an A. Okay? And those are the big three differences between DNA and RNA, like I mentioned before. So RNA is very similar. I mean, it's composed of repeating nucleotides. Here's my nucleotides. It's exactly the same from DNA. It's just I might have a uracil here, which would have an RNA, but I wouldn't have in DNA. Okay? But like I mentioned before, it's just going to be this repeating subunit over and over again. Okay? And that's our basic structure of RNA. So when we want to know the differences, these are the three differences I want you to know. That DNA is going to have deoxyribose, RNA has ribose. This one's going to be two polynucleotide chains or a double helix, where this is going to be a one polynucleotide chain or a single strand. And then the difference in the bases. DNA is going to have A, T, G, and C. RNA is going to have A, U, G, and C. So one base different. And that's the big differences between DNA and RNA. Okay, and then we went and built our kits. So that's it for DNA. Now, I'm not going to give you any assignment today. Okay, so if you look and you see the assignment 4, I don't want you doing it yet. I'm going to change that assignment a little bit. So I don't want you to really have any assignment tonight because you have assignment 2 and 3, which are due tomorrow. So I want you to be really focusing on making sure you get those assignments in. A couple things. It's a really good job on the first assignment. Most people got it in. There's still a couple people that still need to get it in. A couple things I want to mention. One, late things matter. Okay, we have to establish deadlines. You can't go off to university thinking that you can hand things in. One day doesn't matter, 2 days doesn't matter. Okay, deadlines mean something. You have to go off being prepared for the fact that, in university, if you don't hand something in on that day, it's a zero. Okay, so I'm going to start establishing deadlines. Now, on that first assignment, it's kind of a practice. You didn't know about how important deadlines are. I know some teachers are flexible. Okay, so I'm not going to nail you on being late for that first assignment, but now assignments 2 and 3 must be in by Friday. Okay. And that's pretty much it. The other thing that I should mention, when you're doing assignments, okay, if the assignment is due Wednesday night and you send me an email at 6:50 on Wednesday night, I'm not going to be able to respond to it in time. So if you're going to have questions with your assignment, and you most likely will, make sure you get them done ahead of time so that you can ask me the questions and it gives me time to respond to them. I will respond to almost all emails within a day. Okay, but you can't ask me something, about the assignment that's due Wednesday night. I don't have time to respond to it. So make sure that you try and get these assignments due ahead of time. Therefore, we can sort out any problems, and you can still be able to hit this deadline. Okay, so good luck, and make sure you submit those 2 assignments using the proper file names. Okay, thanks, and